Hi, everybody. Welcome to College Chats. Today I'm joined by Mr. Zed Truong. How do you say your last
Yes, sir.
name?
Truong. That's perfect, man. Perfect pronunciation.
All right, cool. Super happy that you joined me. I got to meet Zed a while back, I think half a year to a year ago. I think it was via LinkedIn and
Hmm.
also via when Brian, who I have over here,
No way,
when he
Brian.
reached
What's
out.
up, man? How's it going?
He says, "What's
Oh,
up?"
I love that guy. We
Yeah,
have to
so
catch
when
up soon.
yeah, he's telling you to catch up with him soon, but he reached out, I think, to when you were running your club, which I think you still are, trying to do like a large scale school to school USD, UCSD, SDSU kind of a large scale event. But that's kind of when I first saw you. And then from then I was like, oh, this guy is hyper involved. He likes to help out other students via some other stuff he does with like Project Destined and other things. I saw all it through your LinkedIn, super involved, super oriented into community service and such. So, I mean, would you like to give a little background in terms of who you are as a person?
Yeah, sure, Cruz. So, I know we talked a bit about before you moving from Asia as well. So, I'm originally from Vietnam. So, I've been here for maybe 6 years. I just got my citizenship about like two months ago. So, super stoked about that. But yeah, man,
Congrats,
grew up there
dude.
my whole life. Yeah, till I was 14, move up to the Bay Area. I had to throw away my Cavaliers jersey back then and switch on the Warriors jersey. But that's all good. And then kind of moved back down here for college. So yeah, man, always like interested in business, finance. At the end decided on real estate just because the nature of it. I really enjoy building, kind of like tangible, like seeing it. And yeah, now I'm here, working with Project Destined. I'm gonna be with PGIM Real Estate next summer. So hopefully, fingers crossed, everything goes well. And yeah, excited to take it from here.
Yeah, dude, tell me more about sort of how you kind of come from Vietnam, right? Because I'm also from Asia. I grew up there, traveled here when I was like 8. Didn't go to the Bay Area or anything, but I went straight here to like Escondido, San Diego, SoCal area. But
Gotcha.
me personally, my family background isn't any business oriented, but because of that is what drove me to do business. What's your
Mm,
case?
that's amazing. But what part of Asia are you from?
Uzbekistan, Central Asia. So
Gotcha.
Uzbekistan, there's Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, all the stands. It's like right
Gotcha.
there.
That's amazing. And hey, man, you moved to like a place that's like there's no other better place to be at. So I wish I could be down in sunny San Diego. Yeah. But yeah, man, I guess like the business background. I mean, my parents, we come from like a lot of farmers. So my grandparents were pepper farmers, and they farmed like a bunch of other things in which my short-term memory can't like remember. But there's a lot of things that like they do, and like most of my family comes from like a low-income background, and my parents end up moving to the city. And my dad worked for the government for a while, and with politics and everything, it fell out and didn't really work out for him. So they started to become commodity traders and kind of built their life through then. So I've kind of grown up seeing like kind of like the other side of like, okay, like we're living kind of like in below the poverty line a little bit. And then
Mhm.
going up to like, kind of like more like a comfortable position later on with my life, maybe like late middle school or like high school-ish. So that kind of drives me a bit to business. But I think, growing up like struggling as a kid, like even when I was maybe like not 6, 7 years old, maybe like in like middle school or like, late elementary school, I was always thinking about like how do I make money and like help my parents out. And it started with like just little things, like little entrepreneur ventures, and it grows up to larger things, and eventually, sparks my kind of interest in real estate. But yeah, man, how about yourself? You said that was kind of like like you didn't grow up in that background, and so what was your kind of background? You don't mind me asking?
Yes, so I grew up there, similar to what you said. It's like a little like agriculture type of like little home where we like planted all our like tomatoes, all our like different like fruits, tomatoes, apples,
Yeah.
apricots and stuff like that. And we kind of like it was like almost like subsistence type kind of a living, and it was interesting. And so we moved here, Escondido, San Diego, around 2008. So not the best time to move. As people in finance, not the best time to move. Started low income. Similar to your story, we are at a place now, thank God, that we're at a place where I can, have the freedom to explore things like university because we're living a little bit better now. But because of that kind of background I come from, I have the exact same mentality, which is why I relate to you a lot. It's like trying to help out kind of my family and sort of like the extended family that's still back there at home. So that's kind of why I got into business, more specifically finance, specifically for like when I'm searching for like different finance careers. I literally had to like Google what are some interesting finance careers that pay well,
I
That's
remember
kind
doing
of
that.
the
Yeah, definitely, man. Everything starts with a Google search. I remember like, oh,
literally
how to make six figures right outside of school with a finance major.
something
It was
so
like,
simple like that. Yeah.
iBanking popped up, private equity popped up, real estate popped up, and like going through like mergers and inquisition.com, reading about all of
And
it.
then yeah, them
Yeah,
fun
M and I.
sites.
Oh man. No,
I
those
mean,
are the
I
good old
did
days.
I did have a question for you. You did mention business, you mentioned finance. Where does the kind of the interest in real estate come from, right? Because you're double majoring, which is insane. It's very hard to do two majors. I'm assuming you're stacked, completely stacked on units. So what was the kind of reasoning behind that?
Definitely, man. So coming into like I think my senior year of high school, I mean it's like super cliche. I feel like everybody have read this book, it's just Rich Dad Poor Dad. And this guy, I mean, bro, he was hammering
I
two
have
things like
not read
Bitcoin.
that book.
Oh, no way. But I mean,
Uh,
it's a great book to read to kind of like overall, just kind of get into business. But I mean, you're already in iBanking, so I don't think that's like, super, super crazy to kind of read right now. But, it's kind of like it opened my mind to this kind of new world of like, assets versus liabilities and that kind of stuff. And this guy was hammering three things. It was like gold, Bitcoin, and then real estate. And I was like, man, like, I don't know about Bitcoin and gold, but real estate, maybe I'll maneuver. So coming into my freshman year, I had an internship. It's kind of like went to a real estate event from school and it was all virtual. And afterwards, I kind of like emailed this guy and followed up like 3, 4 times to get like an internship. And it was unpaid, like kind of like investment sales role. And I really love
Mhm.
like underwriting the side, like seeing how the deal pencils out. I really love that. So I mean, I just took it from then. I kind of like, went back and forth with iBanking and real estate for a while. But
Mhm.
eventually, at the end of the day, like I thought real estate was the better fit for me just because of the tangible nature of it. And yeah, I mean, pretty much like the analysis and everything underneath the handshaking kind of nature. And that drove me to kind of be where I am today. And I feel like, my background aligns more with the real estate side since, I don't have that much experience, on the finance side with banking, except for like a little bit of investment research on the side.
Mhm. Yeah, that's super interesting that you said that. That the idea of like real estate being tangible, that's like I'm sort of interested in maybe exploring that field in the future. It's just that I have
Yeah.
very little time to do so currently. But it is something that I've like kind of thought about. Overall, do you think that, you've talked about who's the author of that book, Rich Dad Poor Dad? Kawasaki
Robert
or was
Kiyosaki.
Kiyosaki.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about his, his investment recommendations into real estate, Bitcoin, and whatever, right?
Yeah, I don't know too much about gold and or Bitcoin. I would say, I don't know too much about that, man. I know some friends who made a good amount of money with Bitcoin. I know some guys are like very hard Bitcoin guy. Like I wouldn't be able to comment since I'm not like super super educated on that end. I would say for real estate though, I'm like super super biased just because it's real estate. But I mean, yeah, in
Yeah.
the long term, I think right now with the retail kind of asset class, the risk has been priced in a little bit because everybody, I
Mm,
mean, if you look at retail now, vacancy rate is at the lowest ever, but people are, I think, is still trading at like, I'm not entirely sure if I'm wrong, but I mean, above a 7 cap, in the San Diego market environment for like a standard triple net lease, maybe even lower, I'm not sure. But I think that, the risk has been priced in. So like these assets are not in a certain sense mispriced, but there's a lot of opportunities in the retail kind of
hmm
space. And obviously, I'm not the best to kind of comment on this. I'm still a student, but I'm very like kind of bullish on that end. And also, obviously anything kind of multifamily. I would love to work in mixed use, so multifamily and retail both. But yeah, man, love real estate. There's like no other asset class I'd rather invest in. But I mean, you man, like the private equity space is like something I'm looking into as well. And you probably know way more about that than I do. So what do you think of that?
I mean, honestly, when you said you didn't know much as a student about real estate, I disagree because I think the last entire paragraph you just said were like brand new words with like caps and stuff. I was like, this guy knows his stuff. But as far
Mhm.
as like PE, I'm not very knowledgeable at that space, but I am trying to understand how like it works for specifically like emerging managers because that's kind of what I'm going to be going into at Eaton. It's interesting to see why certain asset classes or not asset classes, but like specific assets get transferred over from fund to fund and see how like sort of the secondaries market goes into play with that. But that's kind of the extent to which I know now. But I'm looking forward to learning a lot more in the role, basically. I did have a question for kind of why you chose to go to USD, right? Because there are other schools in the area of San Diego. I want to understand the reasoning behind it.
Definitely. Hey man, I actually did not. I got rejected to state, so I would have definitely looked into state as well. But I basically applied like throughout mostly California because I wanted to stay in California. I think the only school that I applied to was Fordham in the East Coast, and that's because
Mhm.
like they sent me an email. They're like, "Oh, you're pre-approved for like the scholarship, whatever." And I was like, "Okay, might as well just apply just in case."
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, back in high school, I went to like a super competitive high school. I wouldn't say in high school I was like super driven. I was
Mhm.
more like there's like a whole story about pretty much like when I came from Vietnam to here. I struggled
Mhm.
a lot with like fitting in. So like
Mhm.
everything that I did was mostly for external validation, and in a certain sense, I
Mhm.
wasn't really focused on the right things. That what I wanted to do back then was business. The
Mhm.
I was like a clothing brand, but I wasn't super like focused on getting internships and
Ooh,
getting ready
that's
for college
interesting.
and stuff. So yeah, I wasn't like I didn't get accepted to like a lot of really good schools, like rejected from UCLA, rejected from UCSB, and all that kind of stuff. But coming into
Mhm.
it, it's kind of like I knew I wanted to do real estate, like anything in
Mhm.
finance and real estate, just because of that book. and I searched up like #1 real estate in California, and then it was USC and it was USD, and I was like, okay, I got rejected to USC, which was my dream school, right? And I switched the C
Yeah.
to the D, and I was like, okay, USD, how it is. And yeah, I mean, I love it here. I couldn't, yeah, I couldn't make a better choice, definitely. But I've always wondered what would happen if we go to state because it looks so fun over there. So
Yeah.
we'll see how it goes.
You know, have you heard the saying? It's like when you kind of get how do you say it? Misdirected, not even misdirected, but if you get directed into a path that you weren't expecting or you weren't hoping for,
Mhm.
and then after a couple years, you realize that path was the right path that you had to do.
Yeah.
Have you come to that realization before? Because I have a similar story with like getting rejected from all like the UCs and such. And it's like, I'm
Mhm.
like, though I wish that could have gotten in back in the day, I'm glad I went into this because then it sort of like drove me in a little bit different direction, right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And
100%
then
with that.
you
No,
should
you hit
be
it right.
you should have I bet you have like some sort of affiliate link with Robert Kiyosaki's book because you've been mentioning that over and over again.
Yeah. Big fan, man. I actually was in Hawaii a while ago, so I mean, I wish I ran into him. I would be like, man, you saved my life, but I didn't.
Interesting.
So
I think that's the next book I have to start buying up and reading. I'm currently
definitely.
on what's the last book I'm working on? I think it's like some book by Robert Greene or some other book.
Robert Greene.
But
Oh, I
yeah.
love Robert Greene. 40
Yeah.
Laws of Power, something like that.
Yeah, I think I'm like there's so many chapters. It's like an encyclopedia, but I'm
Mhm.
currently stuck on that. But I kind of
Yeah,
wanted
love
to
it.
touch on, let's see. I want to touch on your involvement now because I mean, again, I looked through your LinkedIn. You're everywhere, man. So like tell me about like the reasoning behind why you chose to be so involved, especially with Project Destined, you're like volunteering, just everything. What was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you nail it down to one word, it's kind of like I'm a workaholic a little bit. Like there's a sense of like dopamine coming up from like just working in a certain sense. And I mean, so something with Excel, man. If you put a headphone over my head and it's just playing house music, like I can just be in Excel for 12 hours straight without eating. Like I'm not even kidding.
Okay, that's interesting.
So like that's just my thing. But I mean, actually maybe that's an exaggeration a little bit. But I mean, for me, it's kind of like with all this involvement at school, it does get a bit like hard sometimes to kind of like schedule everything out, block things up on Google Calendar, and like trying to find time for myself, my social life. I think that the reason why I'm doing all these things, most majorly, a lot of it comes down from my faith. Having like because I'm like I was born Buddhist, but I'm like kind of like
Mhm.
have been discovering a lot about Christianity, and like I would say like hold a lot of Christian like ideologies to my kind of like personal beliefs. And in a certain sense, it's like comes down to like, what can I do? What impact can I make to another person? Right. I always think about like,
Mhm.
later on in life, like I don't really care about how much money I make. Like obviously I'd want to be like, successful. But I feel like at the end of my life, if I'm able to look at someone in the eye and that person tells me, or maybe like because you tell me like, hey, Zed made a positive impact in my life and he helped me out. Like that for
Mhm.
me is more fulfilling than any kind of money. And in a certain sense, my time right now, like I'm not having that much of an opportunity cost where my time's worth like $2,000, $3,000 an hour. Like I'm not
Mhm.
having that. I'm just a student. So I'm spending as much of my time possible to help out my community, which has built me up to the person I am today. So I owe a lot to my school. I owe a lot to my community. And in a certain sense, man, it's kind of like, yeah, I just love giving because like, I don't know, man. It's a thing for me that's like I always want to like at the end of the day, like always want to strive to give for other people. I think that's the purpose of my life. And I think
Mhm.
that's the purpose that God gave for me. So yeah, that's the reason why. So we got a little deep there, but
No, that's
yeah.
good. This is what this is all about. Again, yeah, you said you like to hear, basically you look forward to hearing people say that they've benefited like basically whatever with whatever they're doing rather than a monetary incentive, right? Well, thanks for hopping on right here in this. I think you're going to leave a positive impact for both me and maybe the people that might watch this podcast like later on. But also, I did want to touch on something you said which is an interesting point. You said the opportunity cost of your time now in your eyes is less than later on, right? What if I said from my POV, it's actually the reverse? What if I said, or at
Ooh,
least at least in my
you're right. Yeah.
POV,
Yeah.
check it out. So your time in university, I think of it like this, two personas. You can either
Mm,
go the hard workaholic route similar to what you do now. I feel like you do both at the same time. I don't know how, but you do a
mm,
workaholic route. You can secure a full-time job paying six figures, whatever it may be. You're on the path to success. And then the other route, which is like you don't really know what you want to do in your career, right? So like that differential in between and the amount of compounding that may come into play if with every step after graduation. I think like
mm.
the amount of time you spend on a specific subject, especially early on in your university years, can be huge. So the
Mm,
opportunity cost in my eyes is huge. But it seems
that's
like you're
true.
doing both ends. Like you're like workaholic, and then you're also like hyper community impact, mentorship. But that's kind of from what I see on my end.
Yeah, 100%. I no, I that's a great point too. I do sometimes like show it. I'm like, I'm building out a full model right now for my team. I'm thinking about like
Nice.
if someone else do it instead, and like build out this model, I could be doing something else. Like I'm trying to get Adventist certified so I can come back and teach, which is kind of my thing as well. So I'm like, I could be doing this for myself and stuff. And sometimes it does get. I think what really helps with the kind of like balance between the two of like, okay, like do I build this career for myself or do I kind of like help out my community? I think a
Mm,
balance is good. But every single time I'm thinking about, okay, let's just do this for myself and do all these kind of things. By nature, I think humans are social creatures and we're meant to like
mhm,
build one another up. So obviously, if there's something that's super urgent and I need to get it done, like, within the next like 3 days or within the next day or something, like I'm going to prioritize that. Like, for example, I have a finance exam coming up. So, I'm not going to like go and have like 5 meetings about, like, okay, like someone's figuring out their career, right? But if I don't have,
Oh.
then I'll spend the time, like, okay, like I can spend 30 minutes scrolling on my phone versus 30 minutes talking to someone and kind of like brighten up their day or like talking to someone and like, helping them throughout their career. So that to me is more fulfilling than like 30 minutes scrolling on TikTok, even though I do scroll on TikTok a lot. So we'll see.
One thing you mentioned about the finance thing, I have a finance exam tomorrow, and what you
Oh
just said
no.
about focusing on that over the 5 calls, I'm doing the complete opposite. I'm doing the calls and
Oh
not
man, there's
focusing
a
on studying
balance.
for that exam. But hey, I think
Yeah.
that just proves to show that I kind of value speaking to people like you over, I think the studying is something that, I've already kind of know how to do in a short period of time. And I think the currently the most value I think I could do is like speak to people like you. So now I kind of want to touch on your specific kind of things you did. So starting with like Project Destined. I know that. What's the background of sort of that initiative? Now it's sort of like what is it? Is it like an organization? Is it a firm? Like what is it? Right.
Yeah, so it's started by Cedric Bobo, which you might have seen a
Mm,
lot on his
definitely
Instagram
have.
for some reason. But yeah, he's a great guy. So he did, I think, investment banking before I forgot where at, and he went to Carlyle Group and worked there for maybe 9 years at a principal position. And then he decided to come out, and I think he had like real estate investments on the side. I remember his first deal, I think he said was in somewhere in England. It was like super cool. And then that sparked his
Hmm.
interest in the real estate side. And he decided to start this like diverse based community to help diverse students get into commercial real estate. And that's kind of how the program started. It's a virtual internship. Which lasts about 2 months, and then they train you on the fundamentals of real estate. They bring in speakers, like for example, the CEO of Healthy Property, CEO of Livecore. People bring like anybody out there, that has like an amazing reputation in the commercial real estate world. They'll bring in and like have them speak to students, and they'll bring in. We'll do competition. So there's 3 rotations every single, I think every single 3 weeks, and the students compete to kind of like pitch a
Hmm.
deal in a certain sense to all these people from all these different firms, and then they partner up with like sponsor teams. So it'll be like, let's say like there's a PGIM real estate team, there's a Starwood team, there's a Greystar team, in which the mentors will come on and help you guys like throughout the whole program. And the number one goal is
Hmm.
to help you land internships and jobs. So yeah, I mean it's an amazing program, and I can't speak enough about it. I'm gonna give you a whole sales pitch if I keep going on, but yeah, I love that program. It's an amazing program. Can't recommend it more.
What's interesting though? I think I've tried applying to PD once, but I think back in the day I hadn't done enough deep diligence on what it was to be able to create a great application to be considered, right? But what I do think is amazing about the program is what you mentioned. It like sort of bridges the information gap of
Mm-hmm.
like students that sort of know what to do as a career, maybe through
Right.
connections or parents or whatever they might have, versus students that, they need guidance because they might not come from a background where that's common. So
Mm-hmm.
any program like in that space, such as PD, is like I'm all for it, which is amazing. And now I kind of want to like
100%.
go into like from that, how did you like transfer and translate those skills and sort of your interest into PGIM? And what was that process like?
Definitely. So when I was applying for PGIM, actually like Project Destined helped so much because having that on your resume, because like when I was interviewing, I remember maybe like 3 out of my interviewers were like, "Oh, like we work with Project Destined, Cedric's great." At that time, I was like, I haven't even met Cedric like in a one-on-one yet. And I was like, yeah, Cedric's amazing. I love Cedric.
Yeah,
Uh,
you had to play the
but
role.
yeah, you gotta play the role. But I mean, hopefully they're not watching this, by the way.
That's
But I mean, even if they, I mean, it was still amazing because I kind of like watched the welcoming session that he was like able to present for students, and then see like other competition, and Cedric was there, and I knew inherently he was an amazing guy. And I don't know if it helps,
yeah.
but I actually applied the first time for PD, didn't get in. And the second round for PD, I applied again and sent Cedric like a full on like message about how much I love and want to be a part of the program. And I emailed him and followed up with it. And I was like being super, super annoying. You know, David Rubenstein from
I'm all for those stories.
yeah, exactly. And then this guy David Rubenstein, where he's like, yeah, never stop following up. So I did exactly what he did, and then kind of got in right. So I was like, I don't know if Cedric pulled the string or not, but I'm super grateful for the guy and like absolutely amazing guy. Like I think, I mean, it's like we vibe, and I love him so much. Like yeah, amazing mentor, amazing figure, and he's very real, like very down to earth kind of person. So yeah, pretty much like that's the path I went through. But throughout the PGIM role really helps me a lot with my and knowing what to talk about. It was pre I started like before I started like the whole internship experience with Project Destined, but just overall like knowing that I'm going to be in Project Destined and get trained on these fundamentals like really help. I guess aside from that, man, like these skills and everything, I made a whole document of like all the questions on the Glassdoor and how I'm gonna answer it and like
Yeah.
kind of like have the bullet points and kind of prepare myself that way.
Dude, that's amazing. Some of the stuff that you're saying right now can potentially, there's only so much time that Zed Truong has, but the point of this is like this specific like episode of this podcast is to be able to scale like your story and recommendations to other students from USD, SDSU, who knows, some kid in New York, some kid in like
There
the
you
middle of
go.
Idaho, you don't know. But I mean,
Exactly.
now that you've touched on it, what are some kind of like best practices, advice, tips you would give to students, right? Because you're a hard worker, you're a philanthropist by giving back, and you had success from your efforts by getting into these different roles. What are the best practices you would recommend for students to follow a similar path?
Definitely. I say if one thing I wish I would have done differently is stay niche on a path, ever since my freshman year. I know that, when your freshman year of college, I was definitely worried about the wrong things. Wasn't really like in line either. I think my second semester freshman year, I was like, okay, I gotta get myself together and kind of figure it out. But if you can by a very early stage, figure out exactly what you want to do, either be investment banking, private equity, growth equity, real estate, whatever it is. And each and every single one has its own niche too. Like you can go to acquisitions, development, brokerage, you can figure that out from an early stage and build your resume, starting from, let's say, a more boutique shop to a larger shop, and stuff like that and build it on and then get a full-time offer later on. I think that'll be like my number one thing to recommend. And then obviously, talk to as many people as possible, right? Like obviously you being here
Mhm.
with me today, Bruce, like really appreciate your time because I know you're a super busy guy as well. But like being able to talk to people that are just genuinely positive and like want to give back to community. Like I love your energy, man. I love that you're doing this, right? Because like the reach for this is gonna be amazing. Like you never know who's gonna be able to help, right?
You
and
never
and
know,
stuff like
yeah.
that. So yeah, so like stuff like that. And then I guess at the end of the day, it all comes down to the technical aspect. So if you know what you're doing in a certain sense and are really passionate about like I wake up every day and I'll read like liquidity and I'll read like discounts, right? And these things. I'm like on liquidity Instagram so much as we like in every post. But like, like read these kind of things, stay updated in the market, going to interviews, like just make a Google Doc. I prep for like hours for my PGIM interview, like hours and hours, just like thinking about what they're gonna ask me, how am I gonna be able to like, combat their curveballs if there's gonna be any, and then how to really keep a composure, do mock interviews, right? And putting in that work is gonna pay off at the end. So those would be the three things I would say.
Nice. Yeah, those are some solid advice points. I mean, just to quickly touch on that interview process, what was like your experience, right? You put a lot of work in, you put in those hours to like get ready for the specific questions that we're gonna ask pertaining to the real estate kind of division of PGIM. What
Mm.
were your expectations and what were the actual questions you were like asked? Was there any deviation?
Yeah, there was actually I got like a curveball I didn't expect. Yeah, it was like it could be because like the interviewers are like I think it's in 3 rounds and two people each. And before I had like I attended like a Zoom networking thing with like all the recruiters and then get a hire view and then final interview. And then at first like the first interview was like super chill. It was like mostly behavioral questions asking about your background, why real estate
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And there's like a bit of technical, like for example, like oh these two buildings in the same location, same area, why would they trade for different prices? And like stuff like that. And it comes down to the cash flow, how they manage the property, and all these kind of like very basic questions. And then I got one math question, and it was like a mental math question. I was like, oh my
Oh
gosh, like I'm gonna mess
no.
this up. right? And this guy was like grilling me super, super hard. He was an amazing guy, but he was like, I think because like from my resume, he was like, okay, grill me on this thing, this thing, this thing, and then I need to like really know it well. And I think the question that really answered it was like, oh, a property was trading for $1 million NOI at 5% cap rate. You know, what's the property trading, the price for the property, what's it trading at? And at the end, I was like, I don't know why I froze. Like normally I would know the question. I was just froze, and I was like, I think by instinct, I was like, $20 million around. And he's like, around? Or for real, $20 million. I'm sitting, I'm sweating, man. I like sweat started like going down my face. And I was like, yeah, $20 million. And he was right. And I was like, I don't know why my mental math couldn't figure out that moment, but it was just 1 million divided by 5%. So
At that
it
point, it
was
was
like,
just like intuition.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah, it was just
interesting.
like curveball. Like coming up, I didn't expect that, but a bit of technical questions too, like the market and like which asset class are you bullish on, and those are like kind of like nailed down. So
There you go. Yeah, Zed, just because I want to be wary of your time, I know you have to like go to an airport somewhere right now soon. So I wanted to thank you one more time for hopping on.
definitely.
I know you've got an interesting story to share, and hopefully students on all different ends can benefit and kind of, see what you've done and try to follow a similar path, try to branch out on them on their own. But
Mhm.
any last parting advice before we finish up
I
here?
guess yeah. I number one thing I guess I would say just be yourself. You know, no matter what. I mean, I told you Cruz of that thing where like I felt the need for external validation in high school, and
Oh yeah,
I
same
feel like
here.
if yeah, it's like you're just yourself, man. Like you just like keep
Yeah.
your same energy. Like if you're I don't know if you like reading, go ahead and say you like reading. If you like anime, say you like anime. Whatever it is, like what do you think is like nerdy or people society thinks of you. Don't worry about that. If you're a real estate guy, stay true to heart to real estate. No need to go iBanking or no need to go anywhere. You're an iBanking guy, no need to go to real estate. If some of your buddies says, "Oh, you need to be in real estate," it's so good. You don't have to be in that. Like don't even take my word for it. It's your own experience and your own kind of like well-being that kind of like forms who you are, right? And I would say to Cruz, like, thank you so much for having me today. Like, I really appreciate this again, man. Like, thank you for reaching out. You're a super cool guy. And dude, if you ever need anything, like, just let me know, and I'll do my absolute best to make it happen. But even podcasts like this, dude, like, if you want to like have like an in-person podcast and professionally set up, I have a camera and everything. I can get a mic, and then if we
I
find an editor, we're
remember
getting
from
like
your posts, you organize stuff like that in USD.
yeah.
It's
So if
interesting.
we can do
Yeah.
that, man, like yeah, we'll get the USD background in the thing. We'll have the mics together. We'll edit film a podcast, and it'll
There
be
you
sick, man.
go.
Because I have friends who like you can definitely like reach out and like do this, and they'll love to do this with us.
Yeah.
So yeah, anything you need, I got you.
Sounds good. And I'll definitely put your stuff for anybody that might want to reach out to you in the description and stuff. So once again, thanks,
Yeah.
Ed. I appreciate your time.
So,
And good luck taking your friend to the airport.